The airport was unusually quiet that evening. It was the kind of silence that made the fluorescent lights hum louder than usual and the intercom announcements seem eerily hollow. My last flight had been delayed for hours, and by the time I finally boarded, exhaustion draped over me like a heavy shroud. It was supposed to be a routine journey. Just another late-night flight home. I had no idea it would turn into a waking nightmare. The aircraft was nearly empty, which should have been a blessing, but instead it felt unnerving. A handful of passengers were scattered throughout the cabin, each seemingly lost in their own world. The flight attendants moved mechanically, their faces oddly expressionless. As I settled into my seat, a gnawing sense of unease crept into my gut. The takeoff was smooth, almost too smooth, as if the plane was gliding through an unnatural stillness. I tried to shake off my discomfort, blaming my fatigue, but then I noticed something strange. The lights inside the cabin flickered, just for a second, casting unsettling shadows that seemed to move of their own accord. I told myself it was just turbulence, just my mind playing tricks on me. But then the whispers began. At first, they were faint, just a low murmur barely discernible over the hum of the engines. I glanced around, expecting to see other passengers conversing, but everyone was silent, either asleep or staring blankly ahead. My heart pounded as the whispers grew louder, circling me, yet no one seemed to notice. The whispers were not in any language I recognized. They slithered through the air, syllables twisting and curling like tendrils of smoke. My skin crawled, and I turned to the flight attendant who was passing by. "Excuse me, did you hear that?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. She turned to me, her face unnervingly blank. "Hear what, sirs?" The whispering. "Horses." Her smile was too wide, too artificial. "Everything is fine, sir. Just relax. We'll be reaching our destination soon." Something her tone sent a chill down my spine. I wanted to press further, but her expression hardened slightly, a subtle warning. I forced a nod and leaned back in my seat, but my mind was anything but at ease. Minutes passed, or was it hours? The whispers had subsided, but a new dread settled over me. The plane felt wrong. The windows outside showed nothing but an endless, suffocating darkness. No stars, no moon, just a vast, swallowing void. I turned to check the time on my phone, but the screen was black. I pressed the power button, but nothing happened. I tried to summon the in-flight map on the seat screen, but it remained dark. Panic coiled in my chest. Something was very, very wrong. Then, the seatbelt sign flickered on with a dull chime. "Ladies and gentlemen," the captain's voice crackled over the intercom. "We are experiencing unexpected turbulence. Please remain in your seats." But the plane wasn't shaking. The voice on the intercom sounded off, distorted, as if layered with something else. A guttural, wet sound beneath the words. I gripped the armrests, my breathing shallow. A cold gust of air brushed against my neck, and I spun around. The row behind me was empty, but a pair of gleaming eyes peered at me from the darkness between the seats. My breath caught in my throat. The figure was hunched low, its features obscured, but those eyes, they burned with an unnatural hunger. My fingers trembled as I reached for the flight attendant call button, but before I could press it, the lights flickered again, and in that brief moment of darkness, I felt something move beside me. When the lights returned, my seatmate had changed. The man who'd been dozing peacefully beside me was gone. In his place sat someone, or something, wearing his clothes. The shape was wrong, limbs too long, fingers twitching as if testing their range. Its head tilted slightly toward me, and though its face was familiar, the eyes were empty voids. I bolted upright, heart hammering. "Who? What are you?" My voice was barely a breath. The thing grinned, lips peeling back over jagged, two white teeth. "Just a traveler," it rasped. I stumbled out of my seat, nearly tripping into the asle. The other passengers remained motionless, unaware or uncaring of the horror unraveling around them. I needed to get to the cockpit. I needed answers. But as I turned toward the front of the plane, the asle stretched impossibly long, the overhead lights casting grotesque shadows that seemed to flicker and writhe. And then the plane dropped. Flight 713 was scheduled for a routine overnight journey across the Atlantic. The passengers, unaware of the horrors awaiting them, settled into their seats as the plane taxied down the runway. The captain's voice crackled through the intercom, calm and reassuring. But beneath the professional facade, the crew sensed something was off. The weather report had been clear, yet dark storm clouds loomed ahead, appearing almost out of nowhere. As the aircraft lifted off, a shiver ran down the spines of those sensitive to the unnatural. Something was wrong. Chapter 2: The Omen. Midway through the flight, the turbulence began. At first, it was mild, an occasional shudder. But soon, the plane lurched violently, sending drinks and passengers tumbling. The lights flickered. A shadow moved outside the window, but at 30,000 feet, that was impossible. A woman in seat 17, an elderly traveler with piercing gray eyes, whispered in fear, "They are here. We were never supposed to leave." Her words sent a chill through the nearby passengers. Then, the screams began. Chapter 3: The Descent. A deafening shook echoed through the cabin, but no one could locate its source. Oxygen masks dropped as the plane jerked downward, spiraling toward the dark ocean below. The pilots struggled with controls, but it was as if the plane itself had been possessed. Then, a hand, charred and skeletal, emerged from the cockpit door. The co-pilot gasped, backing away, but there was nowhere to run. The cabin erupted into chaos as the temperature dropped, frost forming along the windows and overhead compartments. The screams of the passengers mixed with guttural, inhuman laughter. The plane crashed into the water with a sickening force, yet for a moment, there was silence. Then the whispers began. Survivors gasped for air emerging from the wreckage, floating in the dark, endless ocean. But something was wrong. The sky was pitch black, devoid of stars, and the water beneath them was unnaturally still. They weren't in their world anymore. Figures rose from the ocean, their eyes hollow, their bodies grotesquely twisted. The woman from seat 17 smiled grimly. "We are theirs now." The forgotten flight days passed, or maybe years. The wreckage remained, but no rescue came. The survivors, one by one, disappeared beneath the black water, pulled down by unseen hands. The world forgot flight 713, but every now and then, sailors whispered of a ghostly aircraft seen hovering over the waves. Year 392, day 64, and what she guessed was the hour 12th. Oh, what she wouldn't give to feel the cool moon-filled breeze on her face again. To feel the shivers of a cold, late lake in the middle of the night, while pulling at the moss from her toes. Yet, if she could go back in time, there was nothing about that day she wanted to change. That day. She had not thought about that day in a lifetime. That one single act that had led to this, shackles around her feet and wrists, bruises that never quite healed, the constant sound of dripping, and the centuries-old bread that she never could quite reach. She threw her head back and looked up at the ceiling. The blood of the covenant is thicker than the water of the womb. She immediately looked away from it. It was those lines that always got her trouble. Her mind drifted back to the day again. She was being led towards the town square, being pushed by the viewers for her trial. Different names were being muttered around her. She ignored them all and marched forward, with her head held high. At one corner, her family was standing. Her mother and father looked at her with sneers on their faces, and if she didn't know better, she would have thought she saw sorrow on her sister's face. Directly in front of her, she looked into the unforgiving eyes of the king. The woman by the side started reading from a scroll. "Do you deny the crimes done by you? Depends on the crimes," she said, pulling her lips into a smirk. "Betraying your own blood for the blood of another. I do not deny, nor do I regret. Then there is only one thing that can save you. The crime committed by you is the highest of them all, but everyone deserves a chance, and you shall get one too. In a pool of light, a needy creature arrives, feed him your bread, and you shall be restored to your full might." The next thing she knew, she had been in this rotting place, with chains wrapped around her body, and here she was, after 3 centuries, a little less bound, but bound nevertheless. 3 centuries she had waited for her needy creature wanting the moldy bread. But her savior had yet to come. She had only her numbers and words for company, for she knew how much words mattered. Swords can cut and kill, but words will stab and stay, burying themselves deep in our bones to make sure we never forget. It was mere words that took her strength away. It was words that brought it back. No gun, no sword, no army or king will ever be more powerful than a sentence. The words of the woman in the town square were what brought her here. The words of the people she had betrayed her own family for. Their support was what encouraged her to keep fighting. She stared into the darkness, occasionally squinting for a pool of light, but it never came. There is a strange kind of freedom in the dark that brought out the inner demon in her. The red sparks at her fingertips had died centuries ago, Angie with her will to live. But it was the feeling of the cold metal on her wrists, the clenching of the brackets around her ankles, which made her wake up every day. But most of all, it was hope. Hope that the mysterious stranger will come to save the damsel in distress. Or maybe he would come, look at the monster that darkness had brought out from inside the witch, and flee. God, I hope he does that after he takes the bread away. That thing smells. She muttered her first words in a year. She took in a deep breath and looked at her surroundings once again. She was trapped under a shelf of rock where the words stared back at her. A few feet to her left was a stone table of sorts, which had the bread on it. Right in front of her, there were a couple of trees. She had no idea how they survived without sunlight or water, but they were there to keep her alive. No, not alive. Just to make sure she didn't fade away. You see, she was a witch. Witches don't die, as long as they have a purpose in life. As soon as they don't have one, they gradually fade into nothingness. Her train of thought was, however, soon interrupted. The trees swayed in the wind, and a flash of lightning lit up the entire forest. Suddenly, in a pool of light, a strange creature with silver wings emerged. "Please help me." The witch lifted her head as she recounted the words of the prophecy in her mind. A pool of light. "What do you need?" she managed to croak out. "Who are you?" the creature asked, still bent over. "Are you a needy creature? Something to eat?" "Oh Lord, just something to eat."